Hello everyone and welcome to On Point. We're here with Rob Tiller today, and Rob is the former counsellor for Relationships Australia who was very dubiously forced to resign after posting an article by Bettina Arndt on his private Facebook page that proved that with official statistics most family violence is two-way, involving women as well as men. And this is primarily because Relationships Australia uses a feminist framework on domestic violence, which, contrary to the international evidence, and there's tons of it, and sheer logic of course, it denies women's role in any family violence. One could say this is purely gender bias, and in an age where equality is supposedly sought by all, this is a complete contradiction by Relationships Australia. Rob then went to the Fair Work Commission claiming unfair dismissal, only to have Relationships Australia disingenuously handle their side of the matter, which can only be seen as workplace bullying on behalf of a feminist ideology that cannot justify itself rationally and therefore resorts to such tactics. A number of such organisations receive government funding, which has been purely based on their following such ideology instead of addressing their clients' needs on an individual basis. Obviously, when we assess the clients individually, we return a range of data, but the use of a one-size-fits-all ideology can only be seen as a methodology to create one-sided statistics that support a narrative and the broader reaches of an industry that has propped itself up to rely on such statistics and the narrative that can be created around them. One of the ideologies used is the Duluth model, and we'll be talking to Rob today about this, how it came about and how it is so widely used, and its inherent flaws, as well as the ACE model of data collection, which stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences. We'll discuss how the ACE data shows the detrimental effects upon children who are dragged into the family law system due to the Duluth model itself. I believe that Relationships Australia are paid by the government, and I've been told that it's between $3,000 and $5,000 per course participant. And the organisation is set up basically to tell men that they are bad and to reinforce that women can do no wrong within their relationships. Having just completed an 18-week wife-beating course with Relationships Australia and having a number of challenging conversations with the course facilitators, as well as writing a letter to the CEO in New South Wales, which never got a reply, I've certainly seen firsthand this one aspect of the family law puzzle and how it serves the industry in the way that it is managed. And upon completion, I did get a small printed piece of paper describing my attendance and a huge high-pressure infomercial style upsell on a range of courses and services. I was never given a crisp white bond singlet or a stubby holder with the Relationships Australia logo on it as a gift of gratitude to the 2019 alumni though. I must say all the guys in the class were lovely, and having heard their stories as well as the responses to their stories from the facilitators, if one were a fly on the wall in that room with a heart, a soul, a brain and a conscience, they would certainly have deep cause for concern. Some of the children's picture cards that were used during the program itself were quite amusing as well, and at the same time representative of the patronising ideology religiously adhered to by the organisation and the level of services being provided to its patsies. Since leaving Relationships Australia, Rob has set his own counselling practice up in Perth, Western Australia, which is in high demand and is getting great results for his clients. Rob's website is robtiller.com.au, so go and check that out. Rob's also written some excellent articles that have been published across a range of media, and he's presented talks and workshops with the likes of Russell Goodrick and Augusto Zimmerman, and has been active regarding family law reform, especially with a focus on the current Family Law Review, championed and co-chaired by Pauline Hanson. Rob is also a strong supporter of President Trump, as all us normal folks are. I'm sure he'd be very envious of my giant MAGA hat, the cowboy MAGA hat, if he was a lesser being, but I'm certain that being a well-adjusted and well-balanced bloke like myself, he doesn't do envy. We simply are just happy for someone else to have a bigger cowboy hat without any insecurities or ill will. So on that note, I'd love to introduce Rob Tiller, and let's get things underway.
So did you you got the little brief before? I mean, we'd love to talk to you about your story with the RA thing. If that was, if you're not bound to any non-disclosure or whatever you want to do there, is cool.
No, yeah, that's fine. I think I've told it enough times to, yeah, kind of
I know.
condense it into a nutshell version anyway.
You'd probably be on autopilot with that one, but I guess it's a pretty compelling. I mean, it's massive, isn't it? And that was right at about the time where people started to realise certain things too.
Yeah, it seemed to hit a nexus point, and I got a lot of support, primarily because of Bettina Arndt's campaign. You know, Bettina's been a long time friend of mine, and you know, I called her up and said, hey Tina, you know, how's this headline sound? You know, fired for spreading, you know, or sharing Bettina's article on domestic violence. I mean, I wasn't technically fired. I took Relationships Australia to the Fair Work Commission, which was a project in itself. And ultimately, the commissioner decided that technically I had resigned, whereas the two high-powered kind of big shot Perth lawyers who donated their time pro bono to help me with my case, both felt that it had legs, it had merit. But in the end, I think it was probably a little too hot politically for this particular commissioner, as I've understood talking to people who know this guy, and so he didn't want to give me the win. But what he did is he wrote 24 pages of criticism of Relationships Australia, and basically how they fudged every rule to kind of kick me out the door. Yeah. And so,
sorry, Rob, to interrupt you.
Not at
Do
all.
you mind me asking you, for people that don't know, Lee, what was the start of it? What was the article? What was the lead up to you taking the Fair Work Commission?
Sure. No, thanks, Lisa. I'll probably give some context. Yeah, so I've been working at Relationships Australia for 8 years, and I worked in their community education department, and basically I presented workshops, I ran groups, things like recovering after separation and divorce, anger management. You know, they have a long list of psychoeducation courses and workshops that they run for the general public. And I was kind of one of their key presenters. I did that 2 days a week. The other 2 days a week, I worked as a counselor and couples counselor in their counseling department. And over the years, I had come to an understanding from working with couples that often both the male and female partner had a part in the conflict scenarios that played out between them. They
Yes.
egged each other on in different kinds of ways. And Bettina in 2016 published an article that really resonated with me, as well as other practitioners in the field. Basically, she was summarizing all of the latest international data and research on domestic violence, and basically showing that most of the time when things got too hot at home, it was because of a tit for tat co-escalation of a couple's, you know, argument or disagreement. And so basically I felt vindicated. I thought, oh, you know, finally somebody is telling the truth about, you know, what I've been observing my whole career. And so I shared this with a group of male practitioners. I'm part of a men's focus group that meets, monthly, quarterly, and we talk shop. And but the thing that got me was I shared it on my Relationships Australia email account, and so that was the technicality that basically they're saying, well, we don't agree with Bettina Arndt. Our domestic violence policy is based on the Duluth model, and you're basically breaching our domestic violence policy by sharing information that we don't agree with on your Relationships Australia email account. And I mean, it was a newspaper article from the Australian. It wasn't like, some propaganda from nowhere.
Yeah.
And so, I'm sitting in a executive meeting with my the top of my food chain, the director of services, and the CEO, and they're basically, that meeting went for an hour and a half, and I'm saying, ladies, I mean, I work with 90% females who are all, either counselors or psychologists. Don't you think maybe they would have in terms of, and I'd never received a complaint from any female clients either. And so basically my work record's spotless. If anything, there, in my personnel file, there were letters of appreciation from clients who had gotten better. And so I'm trying to make a case for myself based on just, my track record, and they wouldn't have it. They were, I could see, and I've seen that the organization has become more ideologically possessed the longer I've been there. It's gotten more towards this radical brand of, kind of these feminists, these academic feminist narratives, and that the guys are bad and the girls are good. And I mean, that's a simple version of it. And women are victims and men are perpetrators. And and I could see that that's who I was now talking to. And basically they said, you're done here. You're not coming back. Keep it quiet and nobody has to know, and you won't get a black mark on your work record. And yeah, that was my last.
So in essence, did they sack you, or did you were forced to resign?
Well, I met with the HR guy the next day, he and I were pretty friendly, and he advised me, you need to resign, and
that's a pretty sorry, Rob, that's a pretty extreme reaction to just an article with an sent through the email, though, isn't it? I mean, like
no warnings, really, no verbal or written warnings, or
even still, I mean, any job, any profession, you want to take on new information. I mean, it's pretty retarded, really, isn't it? Just setting a policy that all men are bad and all women can do no wrong. I mean, that's not providing services, is it?
Yeah, well, I mean, Relationships Australia has, apparently they had to shut down their Facebook page because of the bad press they were getting and just the calls. And I mean, I had former clients calling in and complaining. I had people from all around Australia. So they got a grilling from the bad call they had made, which I think they deserved.
Absolutely.
Because I mean, counseling and psychology in general, I mean, are becoming less and less male friendly.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at the American Psychological Association. I was talking about this in Chicago earlier this year. This war on men that professional psychology seems to be declaring, with all these labels that, you know, toxic masculinity is real, and now it's a diagnosis, and
Oh, really?
and I mean, and then I'm driving through Cottesloe and I see these government adverts, you know, about, you know, these shame campaigns with regards to, you know, basically what I was saying earlier, you know, there's probably a domestically violent man or boy living, or future domestically violent man living in your house, kind of thing. And this is in Cottesloe, you know, this is like the most affluent suburb in Perth. I mean, in general, I think atmosphere at the moment in our culture that, you know, men have a lot to apologize for, and we're guilty until proven innocent. And you know, and I lost my job because of this atmosphere, you know, for sharing something on a, like you said, Adam, on a, you know, on my work server that was research backed. I think Bettina spent 6 months researching this article. It was research backed, and in one of the premier newspapers in Australia.
So you lost your job because you cared about doing a good job, really?
Yeah, well, I mean, the narrative that I've been trained in terms of, you know, I've had hundreds of hours of domestic violence training, and it's all based on this Duluth model that identifies men as perpetrators and women as victims, and it's an oversimplified version of the reality, like I was saying before, that, you know, couples conflict is complex.
Is this Duluth model used internationally, or do you think it's just Australia?
Yeah. No, it was born in America. Duluth is a city in Minnesota, and that's where its originators were. They set up apparently some of the first women's shelters in America in the late 70s, early 80s. And so this model they designed was based on a handful of women they were working with who were in, you know, they were in genuinely bad situations.
Yeah, and this is Duluth, Minnesota, which is a coal mining town or something along those lines. They've got 3 or 4 women there studying, and next thing you know, the whole world's a victim.
That's pretty much the nutshell version.
Amazing, isn't it? Really, and we've obviously got so much international data that's been studied by people that don't just want to make money out of creating a domestic violence industry on the back of the family law industry. So the Duluth model is really just, I suppose you'd say, insanity, really. I mean, that's the way I described it when I was doing my recent 18-week course at Relationships Australia to the people there. And it was quite challenging talking with them about it, because you could tell they didn't want to seem stupid, but they had no choice because they're locked into this model rather than dealing with people on an individual basis. And isn't that really the point of psychology and counselling? You actually want to deal with them on an individual basis rather than just do a cookie cutter with them and assume they're something that they're not.
Definitely. And I think, you know, like I was saying before, in terms of counseling and psychology becoming less male friendly, because there are these assumptions running that all men are created equal and all men, you know, have the propensity towards aggressive behavior to gain the upper hand in couples relationships. You know, there's a lot of assumptions that they're, you know, kind of blanket covering the entire, you know, our entire sex.
Yeah.
You know, so, yeah, but I think initially the Duluth model had, you know, it carries a little bit of weight in terms of, you know, they, you know, but because of the clients that these women were working with were so I mean, they were dealing with genuine perpetrators.
Yeah,
They exist, and John Gottman, who's a kind of famous couples researcher at one of the, I don't know if it's the University of Washington at Seattle. But anyway, he's been studying couples for 40 years. And I talked to him personally when he was doing a training in Melbourne. And he was saying, basically he told me then 1 out of 10 guys is a genuine perpetrator, of guys who get charged with domestic violence.
Yeah.
I'm not saying 1 out of 10 guys. I'm saying 1 out of 10 guys
that sounds about right.
Domestic violence is one of these bad guys.
That's perfectly in line with all the police I've dealt with over the years. They've said, look, about 90% of these protection orders are absolute bullshit, and we know it. We don't have any other work to do though, so and a lot of them feel terrible about what they're doing, and it's a big part of this, isn't it? Really, I mean, what are your experiences, Lisa, in regards to this?
I wouldn't say experiences, because as you know, Adam, I haven't had any personal dealings with domestic violence either way in my life.
Yeah.
But I will say, from what I know about, from what I've learned about men and what I've read about men and men's emotions and not wanting to be seen as weak and bearing their emotions, is that they're not going to report domestic violence. So it's underdocumented how much domestic violence is actually against men as well. So you could say 1 in 10 men are domestic violence perpetrators, but you could be looking at about the same for women too. But men don't go off to the cop shop and report it. They're just, oh well, she's giving me a slap again or throwing something at me again. You just get on with it. So that's my opinion.
I agree. That's been my observation as well, Lisa. Yeah. And I mean, and I've heard, like I was saying before, I mean, in the situations where there was, what I would consider genuine domestic violence going on within the couple's relationship, I mean, instigation, provocation, there's a lot of subtle kind of maneuvers that go on in the early kind of stages of that conflict cycle that warm a couple into that, shit throwing phase.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I mean, and this stuff, and this stuff doesn't get talked about because, I mean, it for one thing, I mean, I'm seeing things become, I think it's part of the polarization of the culture in terms of, we want simple answers to complex problems. And the reality is, these are complex problems. And, and there's a kind of, celebration of all things, female at the moment. And, you turn on any kind of network TV program and, wait 3 minutes and you're going to be hearing some empowered, lady talk about, how great women are. And, and I don't have a problem with that. It's just, you're not hearing the same narratives about, men are,
exactly.
It's kind of, it's for whatever reason, we're sitting at a cultural phase where, it's what's the word?
Divisive, perhaps.
Yeah. Celebrating men it's not whatever that word is.
Not cool.
It's not cool. Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, thankfully, I haven't turned on the TV for 4 years because I just don't think I can do it anymore, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm all about empowering women, but men too.
I think they're, sorry, Lisa?
I'm just saying I'm all about empowering women, and I love to see these adverts and music and videos dedicated to female strength and independence. But like you say, you just want to see the balance out there.
Exactly.
You want to see the celebration of men too. It just gets a bit tedious.
I agree. I think it's great. I mean, I was out at the beach the other day, and these, I'd say they were 10, 11-year-old kids, boys and girls. They were playing footy together, and I think that's one of the positives of these conversations or these scripts that are being played out in the culture at the moment. Girls
Yeah.
can do what boys can do.
Yeah.
I think there's some real benefits to it, but I think also you need, like you're saying, Lisa, to acknowledge the young men, especially.
Yeah.
I mean, old men too. I mean, everybody needs acknowledgement. Everybody needs validation. Everybody needs to be kind of,
Mhm.
you know,
There's also the chance
everybody
that
needs somebody to look up to. We need mentor.
yeah, exactly. It sort of feels to me though that they're linking everything to gender these days. They're trying to give people that identity of their gender and then label them underneath that. Whereas really people are just people, aren't they? You get good and bad on both genders and any race. It's not really about dividing people. I just wonder if the constant narrative and all this government incentives, I guess, because I'm pretty sure Relationships Australia have to toe that line, otherwise they don't get their funding. But do you think that people are getting sucked in by it en masse, or it is just a small amount of people who haven't really got the wherewithal to understand, and they fall into the trap because the trap's being set for people like them because they're profitable?
Well, I think if you look at elections in the major Western countries around the world, I mean, Australia, Great Britain recently, America 2016, I mean, these conservative governments are being elected, and essentially, they represent the silent majority because the mainstream media represents kind of the left and the far left. And
Six
so,
corporate entities.
yeah, and I think there's a lot of, I mean, I've heard from so many people. I mean, the good thing about getting fired or being forced to resign is just how many people have, kind of emailed me, or some of them have called me and just, told me their stories and offered their support. And so I think, in general, I think what's been going on a culture-wide level for decades is the left has been shaming more moderate and conservative members of the public into silence. It doesn't change how people see the world, it doesn't change how they feel, and everybody's keeping score.
That's true.
Yeah.
And so then and I'm starting to see it turn back. I think some of these far lefty or lefty news programs that I tune into just to keep my eye on things, they're starting to feature stories about conservative or moderate members of the public that they wouldn't normally feature. So I think they're getting the picture. It's like, hey, there's a lot of disenfranchised people out there who have lost their voice, and partly have had their voice taken away from these kind of culture-wide shame campaigns, and they're not going to stand for it. And so, I mean, to go back to the just in terms of the policies that are in place at organizations like Relationships Australia, their funding is based on these policies, and so they do have to toe that party line, so to speak, to keep gaining funding. But it's interesting because I have a mate who still works at an agency where the Duluth model is their domestic violence policy, and he's basically got clearance to work with couples who do show mild levels of domestic violence, mild to moderate levels of domestic violence, whereas historically agencies that base their domestic violence treatment on the Duluth model don't see couples together. And so basically he's got permission on the down low or on the quiet to see these couples, but the agency can't green light it on a kind of upfront, behind the scenes type of thing. And I think I think guys have to be careful going to any agency for counseling or any of these programs, because it's just woven in. There's a kind of condescending attitude towards men in general. It's like, hey, we're going to help you become as good as the ladies.
That's so true, isn't it? You'd be far better off seeking an independent counsellor in this day and age, wouldn't you? And I mean, I honestly feel that everybody's their own best counsellor, but you can't get to that point unless you've dealt with somebody first, especially during a tough time of separation or being kicked out of your home, having everything taken from you. And you know, I mean, even with regards to domestic violence and so on, I'd imagine most of the things you saw might have been a bit of swearing or pushing and shoving and lots of regret thereafter. Whereas you even down the pub, you know, someone might give someone a little bit of a push or a punch. They don't lose their house, their kids, their assets, their future, their jobs. They don't lose all of that for just a little bit of a stupidity or a loss of a moment and then get told they're wrong for everything that's ever happened in their lives. You'd like to think that your mate in that job was doing something groundbreaking, but really it's just common sense, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's, you know, as we were talking about earlier in terms of the family court inquiry that Pauline Hanson launched, and the tremendous response that she's received, especially from men who've been through the family courts, and I would consider to be victims of the family courts, and come out the other end having lost everything.
Still alive.
You know, sharing their stories, and with the intention, you know, of hopefully influencing the policymakers to eventually tweak the system back into a more fair look at helping, you know, couples dissolve. But, you know, at this stage, yeah, I mean, young guys especially, I mean, all guys, but, you know, because we're vulnerable, because we've got an animal nature that is, that seeks attachment. And if we get, you know, if we allow ourselves to get close to someone, we bond. And then you have, you know, civil society or the political culture that comes in and says, well, these are the rules of engagement, and these are the rules of disengagement, and those rules don't necessarily fit. They don't fit.
No, one size doesn't fit all, does it?
Yeah, and I mean, and it's tricky. I mean, I watched a movie recently with Scarlett Johansson and that new Star Wars guy, the big, tall, dark-headed guy. I forget his name. And the plot of the movie was they're going through a divorce. You know,
what was it called? The marriage breakup or something like that?
Something like that. I saw it on Netflix.
Yeah, that's the one Patrick was on about. Was watching.
It was
a Star Wars movie called The Marriage Breakup.
No.
I'm talking about the male actor.
That's next.
It might as well be.
Yeah, I think our colleague Patrick suggested that we watch that. He said it was very powerful.
It was well done. I thought realistic. I mean, and you know, and at one scene is the Scarlett Johansson's character sitting with this hotshot, smooth talking female divorce lawyer who essentially just cajoled her into signing on the dotted line, and I'll take it from here. And then, you know, that sets a series of dominoes falling, you know, and this guy gets served papers, and then he's, you know, because this couple had said, like a lot of couples, we'll work it out on our own. We'll figure it out. We'll be fair. That was their initial plan. And then she sits down with this divorce lawyer, and then all of a sudden he's getting served. And then he finds a lawyer that educates him on basically bend over because it's coming.
Yeah. Yeah.
and you're going to have to pay for her legal bills too while you're at it.
Unbelievable.
So but you could see, you could empathize with her character, Johansson's character. You could empathize with his character. I thought they did a really good job in showing the complexities of a split, and also I think all in all, their two characters pulled off a pretty amicable separation. But you could see the beginnings of parental alienation and how easy that kind of that phenomena can set in, and without a lot of,
just snowballs.
Kind of, it's not like mom's, sitting in the room thinking how can I turn the kids against dad? It's just, one domino, the next, and then the next, and then all of a sudden, well, I don't want to see dad tonight. Well, I don't want to see dad tomorrow. I don't want to see dad. So I thought it was good.
We'll see that.
Yeah, let's do it. I also think that once they're locked into that model of starting to make allegations, it's very hard for a person to then retract that and say, look, I'm sorry, I was just a bit of a fuckwit that day. It's all cool now, because they can't, can they? And these people are typically, what do you reckon, Rob? Like from what I gather, 1 in 5 divorces end up in the family courts. 1 in 5 people across society have a mental illness. Is there some subtle way of linking those two phenomena and potentially
correlation?
Perhaps. Well, I mean, you have Deloitte. I mean, I know a few lawyers around, and there are divorce lawyers. There's lawyers associated with the family court that when they're representing the female partners, they're just like, well, has he ever barked at you? Has he ever, did you ever feel scared? Has he ever raised his hands to you? So in a way, they're prompting this kind of course of action that escalates. Not just it's effective in in terms of you're weaponizing an accusation to create a particular outcome.
Yeah, linked to a financial result as well. I mean, that's a tricky one.
But in terms of, you're talking about World War III between two people, and if these two people have kids together, these people hate each other for years and years. Yeah. So I mean, it's a very adversarial type of process, and I always suggest people go through mediation, and I always suggest them go through mediation with people who are mediators that are connected to counselors, that are connected to lawyers, and because there's this sorry guys, I'm forgetting all these key terms today, but there's a kind of process out there.
Oh, collaborative practice.
That's the one. Thanks. Yep. Where basically it's like, hey guys, this is the hardest time this is the hardest time two people ever experience in their relationship, and your instinct is going to be to throw shit at each other and make accusations and burn each other and throw each other under the bus, because if you've got 10 years of unresolved resentment that you've accumulated and kept on a shelf, it's got to go somewhere.
Can I flip that? Sorry, Lisa. Can I flip that whole collaborative practice thing though? Because my ex's lawyer, the family report writer, and my second parasite lawyer, they were all in the same collaborative practice at one point in time. So
they were collaboratively fucking with you.
Absolutely, mate. Collusion is an understatement.
That sounds more like collusion to me.
Yeah, and it is too. I mean, I can't go into details, but I don't care about S121 because I really do feel that that's if family law is just a contract law-based thing, then these people have broken the contract by every step of everything they've ever done. So I'm pretty much sure that I'm not bound to any of their shit. And that's why we're sort of speaking out and starting this media project as it is, because it's phenomenal what's happened to people. And at the end of the day, it should be about the kids. You shouldn't have to spend 150 grand on some parasite's beach house when you just want to separate from someone to reduce the conflict and give the kids a better chance, not to create some sort of a snowballing conflictual sort of mental illness based thing that damages everybody. It's
well, I might sound like Snow White, Rob, but when I was married, our baseline was if we ever split up, we take what's ours, we split down the middle, and we split the children 50-50, and we stuck with that. Even though there was animosity, we then went on to have a mutual amicable agreement as things progressed. We never had any sort of fights through the courts or issues with finances. So I'm hoping more people out there will follow
High
that.
five, Lisa.
Yeah,
That's
big time.
awesome. Well done.
Yeah. So I wouldn't have come to see you for any sort of services, but do you find with your mediation that you actually assist a lot of people to stay away from the courts?
That's a good point.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely encourage, you know, like I said, I know a few mediators around who are, you know, child-centered kind of, they work to, you know, secure the best interests of the kids, and also, you know, it's like you're saying, Lisa, you know, divide your stuff, fair is fair, you know, don't wreck each other's, you know, prospects for the future.
Mm.
And you know, and I think when you I, you know, and I work with a lot of young men as well, and I find myself, it's like, well, guys, these are the rules of the game, and they're not what they were 50 years ago. They've changed, and you know, and while the composure that you maintain, Lisa, exiting your relationship, a lot of women do. A lot of women maintain their composure in a similar way, and then some don't. And then, you know, they might be influenced by a greedy lawyer, or just want it to be done, you know, and so then they can weaponize these accusations because legally domestic violence keeps expanding as a definition.
Yeah.
You know, it's like used to as a punch to the face, and now it's like, well, you know, I don't want you to use my credit card for, you know, for shoes.
As my mate Roy said,
that's financial abuse, and so then these ever expanding, vague, murky definitions of what constitutes domestic violence create all kinds of windows of opportunity for unscrupulous, you know, kind of predatory type, you know, legal professionals to make hay, and then, you know, a woman who's been in a relationship for 10 years and the guy doesn't want it to end, and, you know, he's like, hey, come on, let's make it work. Or, you know, I'm not saying that that's the only scenario, but that happens plenty of times, because statistically women generally end the relationship, you know, 70-80% of the time the lady ends the relationship. So then the guy's kind of, you know, he might have seen signs, but he might not have known that he was seeing signs, or he might have stuck his head in the sand and didn't, you know, want to register the signs. But then she might just go to, well, you know, let's shift into burn it down mode.
The flip side of that could be, though, that the man's been having an affair, say, and she's ended the relationship. So in a sense, he has ended the relationship if he was having an affair.
Yeah, absolutely. Good clarifier, Lisa. Yeah, I'm talking about just calling it, but absolutely.
Yeah.
There's generally, like I said, complicated reasons. You know, I mean, yeah, you know, we're people forget we're animals. You know, we've got an animal nature. we you know, and we're living in a very, you know, a culture at this stage that rewards impulse gratification. And so, you know, our tolerance for discomfort over the decades has gone down, which means our relationship dissatisfaction has gone up, because we expect a lot from our relationships. We expect a lot from our partners. a lot more than our grandparents did.
Mm.
Like I want
People
somebody to
don't
be
work at
anybody
it.
to me. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, and then we're constantly seeing in all the media we're exposed to that, hey, it's so easy. You can find Mr. Right or Miss Right. They're just around the corner. And it's like, well, it's a whole new set of problems.
And the government will pay you a shitload of money to do it too if you just make those allegations and bring the story through, because somebody needs some work. There is also, just thinking about it, there's also that percentage.
Well, I mean, that's the industry you're talking about, Adam. I mean, it's all kind of been woven together as this, kind of, system for separation,
Well,
managing human separation that some greedy lawyers have figured out how to basically clean people out of all of their assets in the process, because that's ultimately what happens when the shit fight goes down. It's like, hey guys, if you're going to do shit fight, you're going to be broke.
well, that's right. I mean, I'm sure you
might as well just go to the BMW dealership and buy your lawyer a new one.
It's so true. You'd be familiar with Luke 11:46 from the Bible, no doubt, Rob?
Remind me. I know Luke. I just don't know that particular
I don't
one
know
off
if I can
the
do
top
it
of my head.
word for word.
My mother would be disappointed, though.
Word for word, without too much swearing, I think it's woe to you fucking parasitic lawyers for loading men up with burdens they cannot handle and lifting not a finger to help them.
Right.
Sure, that's not in the Bible.
Is that the King James version?
I think it is. Well, my version. But they've been doing it for 2,000 years, haven't they? Probably longer. So that's what I was going to say before. But there's also the 20 to 30% of people that stay in a loveless, pathetic marriage, and he's in the man shed. She's doing whatever she wants to do because they do not want to go through this process, and they don't want to be alone when they get older. They might not like each other, but they just don't have the concept of the fact that two people aren't meant to be together forever, and that's okay. Sometimes the relationship can get better once you separate and move to something different and transition for everybody's mental health, rather than getting trapped in those sort of ideas that most people, I think, learn from their shitty childhoods and carry it through unconsciously or not consciously enough.
Yeah, I think that's right, Adam. I think just working as a couples counselor for, I don't know, 12, 13 years now, you just start to see themes between people in relationship. We're ritualistic, habit-driven, gender-influenced creatures, and which means we sniff somebody we like, we flirt with them, we eat a few meals together, end up in bed together, end up in bed a few more times. The emotional Velcro starts to stick. Contemplating pulling it apart starts to bring on the possibility of pain and suffering. So we double down and we go deeper, we get closer, and then Jose Cuervo comes in and we end up pregnant, and and then we got a third entity to consider, and
a tequila baby.
Exactly. Hopefully we can manage ourselves reasonably, during those early dependent years to help that baby get a good start. And then we start feeling like we're missing out, or like there's somebody better out there. Greener pasture syndrome kicks in. All of us, like the idea of strange every now and then. So we're built in with all of these kind of competing impulses and desires that are deep in our genetics and biology, and aren't necessarily conducive to 40-year marriages. And and the culture, you know, the culture in some ways knows this. And the legal system knows this, and the political system knows this, and they've figured out how to capitalize on it, how to monetize it, and how to make a lot of money from it. And so I think at this stage, I'm really interested in the education side of things with regards to you know, young men and women. It's like, hey guys, these are the rules to the game. These are the rules to being human, being a male, being a female. And these rules aren't necessarily mutually compatible. So guys, you know, you need to pay attention to this. Ladies, you need to pay attention to this. Because we got to tread lightly at the moment if, you know, we want to build sustainable relationships with each other in this very kind of volatile stage of our, you know, cultural development.
I would love to see this brought out in high schools, Rob. I often speak about this, rather than your bullshit bloody algebra and whatever else that hardly anybody uses. Actually, relationship and life skills, you know, how to do your taxes, how to change tires, and how to perform in relationships and about society in general. It would be a really something I'd love to do, is to get out there in schools.
We've got the technology even to just do it this way too. I think it's coming because people, especially in the last 12 to 18 months, people are starting to realise that they have to start doing things themselves. This project is a good example. Everything that so many people are doing at the moment is off their own back, off their own intelligence. They're not sitting down and being spoon-fed anymore. They're hunting where they need to go now, and they're probably just trying to chase some of that primal instincts that have been beaten out of them in the last 20 years with all this transgender media blitz on all sorts of crazy shit that, I mean, to be honest, I don't know what the statistics would be, but I'd almost rather be Amish at the moment. You know, they just seem to have it easy.
Well, I mean, it's funny you say that, Adam. I mean, I was raised religious, and you know, I'm a big fan of Jordan Peterson, and I think he's translated a lot of you know, cultural, you know, the currents that are moving through culture at the moment. He's pointed at and also kind of defined and made sense of, for me anyway. And we're moving out of that kind of, you know, thousands of years of being, you know, a religious-based, you know, civilization, and, you know, kind of global civilization.
Maybe
you know,
not if we can help it.
And the job of religion was to kind of, it's like, hey, you know, our ancestors figured out shit a long time before we did, and this was the best of what they worked out, and so, you know, these are the rules for relationships, you know, these are the rules for enterprise, these are the rules for, you know, your day-to-day, you know, how you keep your life together and how you grow it. And we don't, you know, that's been poo-pooed, and that's been, you know, kind of laughed down. And, you know, and I get there's some, you know, some superstitious elements to it that might need to be reworked. But I think, you know, those, you know, kind of rules for life or rules for living that religion gave us, we don't have anymore. And so it's kind of, we've entered a stage of, well, let's just make up our own rules and see how they go. And I think part of what we're seeing in culture at the moment is because we have an innate religious nature, or we have at least an openness to, you know, revering things bigger than we are, or outside of our grasp. You know, I think things like feminism is becoming a new religion, and you know, these, you know, some of the, like, globalism, or globalism, you know, environmentalism. They're where all these kind of young characters are investing their spiritual side, and
it's well said. Yeah, all the isms are pretty much just a mental illness, aren't they, or a derivative of, and maybe not so much a mental illness, but the seeding of ideas rather than facts, and being told things rather than just trusting your observations in things. And I mean, definitely leftism is a mental illness, and by far, there's no other way to describe it. You just look at what's happening in America at the moment, and it's
Yeah, watch a
insane.
presidential debate.
Oh, did you get a chance to see my
That's awesome. I'll want that hat.
well, that's interesting because you'll get to see the intro later, and yeah, it's. I think you'll get a good laugh out of that.
Nice.
So what is your website called? Did you want to give yourself a bit of a shout out for your services while you were here, or have you got too much?
Thank you, Lisa. Yeah, so I mean, I've got a website. It's robtiller.com.au, TILLER. And like I was saying before, I'm really enjoying working with a lot of young men at the moment. Also, I'm working with a lot of recently separated men, and still I work with a lot of couples. So I've got a private practice in Perth, and I also do sessions online. So I have clients over East that I talk to on Zoom or Skype, and even some in America that I see. So yeah, I'm available for.
There's going to be no shortage of clients either, is there? It's just, I think it must be just wonderful to have your freedom, really, and even the conditions in which you got that freedom probably isn't a downside. Of course, there's publicity there, and publicity for the right reasons, because you care.
I mean, it's funny you say that, Adam, because I mean, I was in the States at a conference, and people recognize me. I'm thinking,
wow,
because I live in Perth, and it's I'm pretty, I run in small circles, and then my story's gotten around, and so that and I think what it resonates with is like you were saying before, it's just men are really feeling the pinch of systems that might have been well-meaning at some stage, but they've swung too far, and they're not functional in the same way they might have been at some stage. The functionality has come and gone. And I think, like you were saying, Lisa, and I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you implement a case-by-case kind of family court approach to couples. But I think even if the judges were given the breakdown of
more background.
Yeah, it's like, well, guys, these are the real statistics. Most couples are fucking it up together.
Yeah.
And, and if one of them goes off once and, does something stupid, that, a perpetrator forever does not them make.
You've got to fuck things up to learn, don't you? I mean, if you don't make mistakes, you can't go forwards and evolve. So it's actually a positive to make mistakes here and there. And it's a positive to be able to acknowledge and accept that, and to stand up and say, yeah, I made a mistake. I'll try not to do it again. Please give me back my kids one day in the next 4 or 5 years, or whatever it is, it's just.
Yeah. I mean that, and just the research around that kind of long-term impact of parental alienation and separation on it wrecks the next generation psychologically, and it really sets them up for their own failures in their own marriages and
future family court clients.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Just round and round, isn't it?
It is, isn't it? It's quite a clever business model, isn't it? I mean, it's disgusting, but parental alienation is the core of their business model, and they know full well because although they cherry pick a few statistics here and there, they've seen all the ACE data, the adverse childhood experiences. They know full well what they're doing to children. So, as far as I can see, these family lawyers, 95% of them have proven that they should never be allowed anywhere near families, children, or people in a vulnerable time because of the way they currently practice. You know.
Yeah, and it's not all of them, but it's definitely quite a few of them, and they know who they and they make a lot of money. They make a lot of money, and and I don't know how they
Sleep at night.
Drugs and alcohol. Yeah. Lots of it.
Right. The cocaine trend on Perth.
Yeah, and whatever else to make them actually sleep. But yeah,
I'm thinking of one of my 20-something male clients, who, I don't throw them in the deep end at once in terms of their, education, but, I warm them up to the fact that it's you got to be mindful about how you enter a relationship these days, because even if you're dealing with a totally sane and reasonable lady, there's a lot of factors that can work against you down the track to burn your life down. And you're just getting started. And so, I'm having to kind of coach guys into thinking strategically about how to move forward in terms of protecting, their careers, protecting their assets, protecting their livelihoods.
I have an 18-year-old, Rob, and I'm telling him all the time he's loved up with this girl. He's been with her for about 6 months. Very nice girl, but I keep saying you can't just think about your dick all the time. You need to keep your eyes open. Make sure you're, at equal playing fields. Oh yeah.
Good on you, Lisa. And I mean, I don't. It's not my intention to sound sexist. Like I'm just, I'm giving guys like a warning sign of, danger, potential. Lady monster. But it's more just like, whoa. Because I've worked with men on the other end of separation for so long, and they had very little preparation for the gravity of what was coming. And I feel like if they did, even if that same freight train hits them, but they've been briefed or coached on, this is how it can go, worst case scenario.
And it's not sexism, Rob. It's because the system's set up in favor of the woman. It's not that we're fighting the woman. Our Facebook group that we're releasing this week, as part of the mission statement and my initial video cast on there, we are saying we're a gender neutral group. We're fighting the system, but unfortunately the system has it all laid out for the women. And that's what I feel that you're doing in your job, is preparing the male for that. Not because you've got to have a hatred for women and watch your back with women, it's watch your back with the system. Essentially. Yeah. Is how I'm reading you.
Thanks for saying that, Lisa, because I don't. I mean, I have heaps of female clients, and I've got a mother and sister-in-laws and partner, and I've got. And
you have plenty of beautiful female friends too, Rob.
Who I want to see win. Yeah, I mean, but I think the culture at the moment is pushing us into these separate corners of a boxing ring, and they're working us against each other in a lot of ways, and I think I got I could see that, and I'm at this stage I'm working on, how do you remedy that? How do you kind of without saying, well, burn the system down and start over, which I think, I think in some regards, like Pauline Hanson with her family court inquiry, she's not necessarily saying burn it down, but she's saying it needs to be upgraded. It needs to be fairer for both sexes. It needs, it needs to be modified, which I agree with. But that's not where we're at. That hasn't happened. And so then the reality is that people need to be educated in terms of how the system works on the one hand, and they need to be educated in terms of how relationships work. Human, that human kind of animal side of things, that, there are forces operating within us that are vastly more influential and vastly more intelligent than we can consciously understand. And they're moving us daily, and if we're not keeping an eye on them and we're not keeping them in some kind of check, then, they're potentially pulling us out to sea. And so, and those conversations aren't being had, and men have different pulls, women have different pulls, different impulses, different desires, different motives. We've got different agendas. The sexes have different agendas, and this is all unpopular at the moment because it's not politically correct. But biology and our evolutionary history they don't give a fuck about politics. They have their own agendas, and they will keep using us as their puppets until we wake up. And
there's only two genders, and I actually think this whole thing is designed by a guy that owns a lot of soy products, 'cause
So Monsanto's behind this.
Well, they're behind everything, aren't they?
Well, Rob, if you ever feel like setting up any workshops in schools, please give me a shout.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll join you. I've got a little bit of psychology qualification, basic stuff, but I'm very into. I'm a real life kind of person. Tell it as it is, and I think I've got my finger on the pulse with emotions.
And you know what? If you guys want to even think about setting it up like on an online app-based sort of thing, we could do that too. I don't have any psychology degree, but I lived with a psychopath for 10 years, so I can back that up.
So you might have a job in criminology there, Adam.
I'm very, very well versed in how it all goes now, I tell you.
Is there anything that you would like to wrap up with, Rob, before we depart and before we start lagging on this video? Anything else that you'd like to say?
Well, I think thank you, Lisa. I've really enjoyed meeting both of you, and I really feel honored that you'd spend this time talking to me. Maybe just what the last note Adam was mentioning. I was thinking about that in the shower this morning, because we all have traumatic and negative experiences with the opposite sex. I have bad memories with my dad, bad memories with my mother, my grandmother, my grandfather. I can remember specific instances where I feel like they overreacted to, some indiscretion of mine or some bad judgment of mine, and, brought down the heavy weight on me. And I've had experiences with teachers and professors and lovers and partners that have really had an influence on how I think about the opposite sex when I'm in a low spot, if you get my meaning.
Yeah.
And, and I think some of these characters who are spinning these narratives that are entering, these kind of radical narratives that are entering the culture at the moment, you know, these radical feminist narratives, for example, you know, I think are coming from a place of, you know, coming from characters who, for probably good reasons, have a real bone to pick with the opposite sex. And fair enough. And
Yes.
it's been, fortunately, I've because I've done the work I do and have the career I have, I've gotten to see that we all have that. We all have bad experiences with the opposite sex that color our thoughts towards the opposite sex, especially when we're in a shitty space or in a bad mood or feeling victimized for whatever reason. And I think if we're going to get out of this together, we're going to have to own our moments of hate of each other. You know, we're going to have to say, yes, I can be a hater. Yes, I've had good reasons in the past for hating the opposite sex, for disliking them, for feeling hard done by them. You know, I've had shit done to me. That's you know, it's colored that. And then how do I contextualize that so that that doesn't color my future? It, you know, it can help me be wise to the possibilities of, you know, when I'm dealing with a bad character, how to deal with him better. But, you know, not seeing every member of the opposite sex through that lens.
I
Not
think
carrying your baggage around, basically.
Sorry.
Not carrying your baggage around from each relationship, you know.
Well, I mean, I think we're all carrying baggage. I'm thinking just being aware of our baggage. You know, like I have baggage. I have baggage around women. And you know, and the older I get and the more I've done this work and the more I've been in long-term relationships with women, the clearer that baggage becomes.
Yeah, you've got to own it, don't you? And you've got to separate it between the individual and a species, a gender, whatever it is, because that's
hard to do. It's hard to do. It's hard to do.
It would be in your job, hearing about it day in, day out. You must. I'm surprised actually that you don't absolutely despise women working with blokes all the time, listening to
you
stories.
know, well, I mean, I think that's a good point, Lisa. I think what I'm saying is that we've all got the capacity for destruction, and we've all got the capacity for being mean and being intentionally mean and making a mess of things and doing it at least half consciously. And until all of us look in that mirror and say that to ourselves, that I can be a bastard, I can be a bitch, I can be a total MFer when I feel like I'm backed into a corner, then I don't think we're grown up enough yet to actually be in a relationship.
That's
we can't look in that mirror and kind of own our own capacity for being an asshole.
That's very well said. Very well said. I think most people probably don't seem to even know what relationships are for, are they, these days? So there is that element that until they do get that maturity where they can see each case as an individual situation. And I mean, I find that quite easy and much easier to do, you know, just deal with something as it is in reality rather than deal with it in a false reality and just blame a particular gender or a particular race or anything, because I'm going to get a better outcome for myself if I focus in on what's really going on. But I guess when you said consciousness, I think that's the key, really, you know, processing things consciously versus drifting into that monotonous, unconscious life that sometimes relationships can lead to, you know. I mean, it's not that straightforward. Should I be wrapping things up at the moment, Lisa? We've sort of hit that point. We could talk forever, Rob.
Well, we could, but unfortunately I have to go on night shift tonight, so I'll have to depart. But it's been really enjoyable talking with you today. And I hope that we can catch up again soon. You keep your eye out this week for our Facebook group launching, which we'll
that'd be
obviously
great.
be inviting you to.
Okay.
And I don't know if Adam has already, but he needs to send you a consent form through
Oh, yes.
for this interview to be released, if that's all right with you, onto social
that'd be
media.
great.
We're doing things by the book.
I'm looking forward to it, and I'm I don't think any of us said anything today that will.
No.
I'm not going to bother about anything I say going forwards at all. It's all good with me.
Nice. No, it's lovely meeting both of you, and I'm really I'm behind the work that you're doing, and
Thank you.
and happy to support you guys however I can. You guys do a good conversation. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah,
And
me
likewise,
too.
Rob. Thank you so much, mate. That was
Thank
brilliant.
you.
Yeah, well,
You take care.
We'll keep in touch, guys.
Let's do it, mate. Thank you. Talk soon.
Bye.
Bye guys.
Bye.